how to progress cardiovascular training. And so, once you kind of get an idea, wrap your head around the idea of the intensity you start out with, and I provided examples of those 3 different ways to do that, see above. How do you progress? Well, pick one thing. So there's 3 variables you can manipulate: the intensity of the training, the duration or how long a training bout lasts, for 10 to 15 minutes, whatever, 20 minutes, 30 minutes, like we've talked about being the ultimate goal for moderate intensity training, and the frequency, how many times a week you actually train. And so in the beginning of your training plan, and I provided an example of a progression, you might be somebody who's just getting started, and so you would select 0.65 or 65% of your heart rate maximum and use that as your guide or your talk test. You're like, I'm going to be able to hold a conversation fairly consistently throughout my exercise routine if I was to have a conversation. Or I'm just on the verge of starting to sweat a little bit, but I'm not quite there yet. That could be your initial intensity. And then you say, I'm unfit. I haven't really been doing anything. I'm going to do this for 10 minutes. And I'm going to do this twice a week just to get started because it's going to be a new thing for me, and that might be difficult for me to follow and adhere to initially. And so you start there. That's your first week. Low to moderate intensity. 10 minutes twice a week. That's it. If you go to the gym, you'll spend more time going to the gym than you actually do training, and that's okay. The next week, though, you're like, that went well. You could increase any of those variables. Now, typically, we recommend increasing, we being the major governing bodies of exercise, and just looking at the guidelines, increasing the volume first. Volume would be either the frequency or the duration. So the next week, you might add another 5 minutes to your session. So I'm just going to do 2 times a week and then so I'm doing 15 minutes per session. Or I could say at 10 minutes and add another day. And you'll see that reflected in the progression example that I provided. That doesn't mean you have to start out at 65%. You might find, that is super slow. I can go a little bit harder than that. So you might do a little bit faster. You might use the RP and say, I can hang out at a 12 pretty steadily this week. That was pretty easy. Maybe I can do a 14 next week. Okay, so the point is to progress something, with the recommendation typically to progress the length of time that you're exercising or how many times per week you're doing to get up to that 5 days a week, 30 minutes a day. But I would just say progress something. Even if it's the intensity initially, it's not going to be like you're going to start sprinting. I would not recommend. If you haven't been doing anything, don't walk one week and sprint the next. Something reasonable. So you might do 65% one week and then 70% the next. You're like, that's fast enough for 15 minutes. I'm going to try to bump up the time next week, or I'm going to try to add an extra day. Okay, so progress one variable at a time. Don't progress more than one variable at a time, though. That's a good way to get yourself hurt, and go a little bit too fast for your body to keep up. Where you start is going to be where your current fitness. You're like, I'm pretty fit, or I'm fairly fit. Maybe you can go ahead and do 4 days a week at 20 minutes a session, or maybe you're fit enough. You're like, I'm just going to do the intense stuff and do that 3 times a week. Fine. Again, wherever you're at, you're going to have to decide. If you're not really sure, I would err on the side of going too slow, too easy initially. That gives you room to grow, so to speak, and it also ensures you don't get hurt.